Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Steel Blue Boot the Blues webinar in conjunction with Beyond Blue and some of our very special guests, where we're going to be talking about mental health, amongst other things. We've got a fantastic panel lined up for this discussion today. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Gemma Tognini. I wear many hats, but today it's my pleasure to be your panel facilitator. My team and I have the great privilege of working with the Steel Blue team, and in the context of this project and this scope of work, the guys at Beyond Blue. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on which we are meeting today here in Perth and across Australia, and acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging. Like I said, we've got a fantastic morning lined up for you, some really important conversations. We want you to feel really comfortable about that. This is all about demystifying the area of mental health, and it's an area that so many of us have challenges with, myself including. In a little bit, we're going to have a fantastic panel. Glen Jakovich is joining us, Garry Johnson, the big boss at Steel Blue is joining us, Michael Brooks, South Australian soccer legend, is joining us, and of course Dr Grant Blashki is joining us, and he's actually going to kick us off this morning with a fantastic presentation I've had the privilege to have a quick look at. It's got some real gems, some real nuggets in there. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Grant, to Blash, and he's going to take it from here, and I'll be back with the panel in just a little bit.
Hi there, and thank you, GT, for that great introduction. And I hope you're all doing well in this webinar. And very excited to have a great team here today. So the way we're going to do it is I'm going to speak for a little while, and then we've got an amazing panel, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panel. But let me just tell you a bit about Boot the Blues. I'm Beyond Blue's lead clinical advisor, and we've been very excited to have this ongoing partnership with Steel Blue since 2014. They've raised $350,000 for Beyond Blue, which supports more than 7,000 support services calls for us. So, an amazing contribution, and just shows how committed they are to this area. And so I'm going to move on with our slides and tell you a little bit more about the work that we've been doing with them. This is a pretty busy slide, so don't worry about reading the whole thing. But I just wanted to make the point that mental health problems are really common. And, you can look at the stats, and a recent survey says that, about 15% of people have high or very high psychological distress, and about 1 in 5 people have a mental health condition in the past 12 months. And if you think about your friends or your family or yourself, you'll definitely know people who have had mental health issues that they've had to deal with. It's a really common issue. And over 3 million people saw a health professional for their mental health in this recent survey, and over 600,000 jumped on one of the phone or digital support services. Also, people have an idea about how to improve their mental health when they're having a tough time, and that's really important. They understand about trying to think differently about things and getting into their exercise and doing things they enjoy as well. So let's go to the next slide. And I just want to talk to you about some of the trends that have been going on in 2022. And you'll know about these. I mean, what a time the pandemic was. Who saw that coming? And I know that's been a huge issue for the building sector and our tradies, for the whole community, but particularly this group. We know that inflation's been going through the roof, and a lot of people are under stress. And amongst all that, we had a pretty biblical couple of years if you're on the east coast of Australia and involved in the fires and floods and things. I think, my friends who are involved in the building industry have said it's been a pretty rugged time with, supply chain issues and customer expectations. Over at Beyond Blue, we've seen 18 million website views, over 300,000 contacts to our support services, almost 1 million people on our peer forums, which is like a moderated chat forum. And we even have an app that helps people avoid their suicide risk. It's a pretty heavy topic, but unfortunately something we've got to talk about. And more than 30,000 people have downloaded our Beyond Now suicide safety app. And so if we have a look at our next slide, you can see that Steel Blue have really been a pioneer in this area. You know, they're collaborating with Beyond Blue, and they actually surveyed almost 1,000 of their customers to find out what is the story with their mental health out there. And, you know, this big survey actually gives us an incredible view as to what's going on. So we found out that 1 in 3 of the people who did the survey had experienced high or very high distress in the last 30 days. And about half had felt in the last 30 days either sad or hopeless or worthless. Pretty serious. Now, I just want to qualify that, you know, not all stress is a mental health condition, right? You know, sadness is sadness. You might have lost your job or your girlfriend broke up with you or whatever. That doesn't mean you got depression. You might be worried about your next job or whatever. That's worry. Doesn't mean it's an anxiety condition. But we do know these conditions are pretty common, and this survey reinforces that. Let's go to the next slide. So we know that out there in the community, there's still a lot of stigma and embarrassment about mental health issues. And we know things have been changing and improving. But in this recent survey, you know, 1 in 5 people said they wouldn't tell anyone if they had depression. And 1 in 20 thought depression was a sign of weakness, you know, like you just need to toughen up, but, you know. And the good news is almost 90% did understand that depression is a real medical condition. 1 in 5 said they wouldn't seek support, and 1 in 3 were a bit unsure about what they want to do. And that's why the work with Beyond Blue or a webinar like this is super important, because it gets the message out there. And we're going to hear from some of our brilliant panels soon. And I always say, you know, one famous footy player is worth 1,000 professory doctor types like me. You know, you get your footy players talking about mental health, everyone's talking about it. So we are seeing that people are much more comfortable talking about these issues. And that's really important because there's some great help out there that can make a big difference. Let's jump to our next slide. So one of the things I find when I'm not at Beyond Blue, I work as a GP. And, you know, unfortunately, we do see a lot of tradies, a lot of workers come in with injuries, you know, whether or not they've done something to their hand or their back or ankles or lifting or whatever. You know, this is a part of a sort of occupational hazard. And I know there's a lot of work that goes into making workplaces as safe as they can be. But, you know, one of the things that came out in our survey is that 1 in 4 had said that they'd taken off some work due to physical injury. And what I see in the clinic is you get the triple whammy when you have an injury. You've got the pain of the injury, it's affecting your income. But I think for tradies in particular, it really messes with your identity a bit. You know, they're often very physical people, you know, used to being very active. And so it can be a hard time when you have a physical injury. You've got to really look after yourself. The other point I want to make is that many people understand that you have to look after your physical health to stay healthy, right? You got to do your sport, you got to eat well, don't drink too much, all those things. But we really want the takeaway message from today is look after your mental health, make it a priority. You know, so that means getting enough sleep, making sure that you're looking after your mind, staying connected with people that are really important to you. And we'll talk a bit more about that. So let's jump to the next slide. So we found some more things out in the survey. One was that 40% of people had spoken to a friend or a family member about their mental health and well-being. So your friends and your family are absolute gold when you're having a mental health problem. And, keeping up those connections is essential. Almost a third had spoken to their GP about a mental health problem. And in Australia, we're actually pretty lucky. We're sort of the envy of the world because you can go along to any GP and do a thing called a GP mental health plan. So your GP will sit with you, they'll do this whole form, they'll work out what's going on for you, and then that entitles you to Medicare subsidized psychology appointments. So that's pretty good because often when people are having a hard time, their finances aren't always great and they don't want to go off for expensive appointments, but the mental health professional can really help. And we saw in this study almost 20% of people had seen a psychologist. So that's pretty interesting. What about the workplace, right? You've got 16 to 19% had spoken to their work colleague or manager. And I think I want to talk to you a little bit about mentally healthy workplaces. I know a lot of people listening here are either managers or working in a business or running a small business. And there's lots that you can do to make your workplace a mentally healthy workplace. That's so important. When you think about it, the majority of your waking day is in your workplace. And one of the things that actually keeps people mentally healthy is having a great sense of purpose, having a job, catching up with people at work. And in a mentally healthy workplace, a lot of it comes from the leadership. So setting the tone, running an event like this, Steel Blue is sending a very clear message that, hey, we take this stuff seriously. I think also just the common sense stuff that sometimes gets forgotten, having a really clear role description about what your job is and having the capacity to do it and the tools that you need to do it is really important. What I see as a GP is if you get someone in a job, often I'm seeing young people and they're a bit unclear about where their job starts and ends, that can cause a lot of stress for them. Then there's the really obvious stuff about, bullying and discrimination. And, there's been such a good movement in Australia to really stamp that stuff out. But, human beings, we're a mix of nurturing and nastiness, all of us. And, how do we be our best selves? How do we make a workplace a safe place for people? And I think, there's things you can do, simple things. When someone's starting to gossip or giving someone a hard time, you can say, no, that's not on. We're not doing that. You've always got a choice, and I think this stuff's really important. Big study found that not only is having a mentally healthy workplace good from a humanistic point of view, no one wants to see people suffering, but from a business point of view, PricewaterhouseCoopers found every dollar you spend on making a mentally healthy workplace, in the end, you get back $2.30. How does that happen? It's not magic. What happens is you have less people going off on absenteeism, less mental health claims. People are excited about the work and you retain good staff. So there's really good business reasons to take this stuff seriously as well. Let's go to the next slide. So booting the blues, what are the things that you can do, simple things in your life? Some of this is about mindset. And like we talked about, realizing that you've got to prioritize your mental health. Now, during COVID and with all our electronic communication, one of the big problems is people forgot how to switch off. I always like that saying, you start off thinking you're going to work from home, you end up living at work. Your emails are going off, customers contacting you, driving you mad. So, setting some boundaries about when you're at work and when you're not. Having a clear sense of purpose in your job. As I said, work is one of the healthiest things you can do. And I see a lot of my patients when the wheels have fallen off, a good workplace will get them back in action, even if it's part-time, or they'll make some adjustments. And it's not only good for the workplace, it's really good for that person to get their mojo back, see their colleagues. And here's the spin-off. It sets the culture because everybody else is watching. Hey, what happens when, Joe goes off? Is he supported by the organization, or are they sort of, managing him out of the way? And so that's really important. I've put there, something fun. We don't talk about fun enough, do we? Everything's so serious on the news and everything, but make sure you're carving out some time where you're off the hook. You're catching up with good friends, might have some hobbies that you really like. Carve out a little bit of time for that every week. If you're bouncing from work responsibility to family responsibility, you can get exhausted. And this is that idea of saying, hey, no, I've really got to take seriously my mental health and look after it. Connection and belonging. Our friends and family, all the studies are showing that people who are more connected have, better mental health. And just, I know the compassion out there, there's some pretty lonely people out there too. I'm always surprised as a GP, you get chatting with someone and you're like, oh, who should we give a call about this? And I don't really have anyone I can call. So you can help solve that. You can reach out to a mate or a colleague who you know is doing it tough and they're on their own. You'd be surprised what a huge difference it is to someone who's lonely to just get that connection. Know that there's lots of help and support out there, and we're going to talk about all the different services in a minute. But the workplaces, you'll have your own systems. You might have a counsellor, or if you're a small business, you should know that there's lots of supports. And keep up those healthy habits. Exercise, getting enough sleep. Careful with switching off the tech and stuff after about 11 o'clock. It was so easy to stay up half the night. Don't overdo the alcohol. It's a bit of a trap. And, take all this stuff seriously. So let's go to our next slide. There's lots of online tools out there, and I'm not going to get you to read all these now, but I just did want you to note the bottom one there that says Heads Up. On the Beyond Blue site, there's this absolutely brilliant website called Heads Up, and it's got a guide for workplaces, how they can make a mentally healthy workplace. So even if you're a small business or you're some boss on a board, have a look there. There's a whole big guide about things you can do to make your workplace a healthier place to work. Let's go to the next slide. Now, we're really lucky in Australia, and there's lots of supports, and I'll put the numbers up there. Beyond Blue for the young ones, Headspace is amazing, Kids Helpline, 1-800-RESPECT, brilliant. If you've got a sort of family violence situation, they're great help. Lifeline for people who are having serious sort of suicidal thoughts. And, Q Life for the LGBTI community, very important to understand the issues. On the big orange square there, that's referring to this incredible system that Beyond Blue's running called New Access. And what it is, they're new access coaches for small business people. They've recruited business people who understand the real pressures of running a business. And then those people have trained with extra mental health skills. And they're coaches, right? They're not psychologists, but it's free. It's confidential. You can access it through the Beyond Blue website. It's all around Australia. You can do it as telehealth. And great to have a chat to one of our new access coaches who has that shared understanding of real business stress and the basics of mental health. So I'm coming up to the end of my little presentation here. I'm really excited to have a chat with our panel, and I'm going to hand over to our mob and get this exciting panel happening.
Thanks so much, Blash. I could have listened to you talk all afternoon. I don't reckon there's a problem with that for sure. So many nuggets in there and so much truth. And I found myself nodding along because you're so right. I mean, we've all been there. So good time for me to introduce our fantastic panel, and I'm just going to adjust my screen so that the this is real webinar, people, just so the glare lets everybody a little bit easier. And why don't I welcome the people that I can see first up? So Michael Brooks, welcome Brooksy. How are you going today?
Good, thanks, GT. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm back in the free state of West Australia, and it's brisk this morning, so I'm feeling it. For those of you who haven't met Brooksy before, he is a former professional soccer player based in South Australia. He's a Beyond Blue volunteer, and I can't wait to hear what he's going to share this morning. G'day, Jacko. How are you?
Hi, GT. Great to be a part of it, and I love that nickname of yours.
Well, I know that we're allowed to call you Glenn because that would mean you're in trouble, and you're definitely not in trouble this morning. You need no introduction. Garry Johnson, the big boss of Steel Blue. What a brilliant business. And it bears repeating this morning, everyone, that since 2014, Steel Blue has raised more than $350,000 for Beyond Blue, which is just a tremendous effort. I've been in around corporate comms and this sort of thing for 20 years now, and these sorts of partnerships are rare and really, really valuable. So I just want to honour you, Garry, and your team for that this morning. It's a thing to be proud of. And, you know, bringing this webinar to life and facilitating this conversation. And, of course, Blash, you're part of the panel as well. And I guess, can I start? Maybe I'll start with you, Jacko. I want to start by one of the points that Blash brought up early on in his conversation, which is these real conversations, a footy player, a soccer player, you know, tradies, business owners, these conversations carry so much more weight often because people can identify with them. It's not necessarily being spoken, you know, a conversation with a doctor who has a different level of authenticity. But this is someone, you gave us some really powerful insights the other day when we were prepping for this session. Maybe you want to just start there.
Yes, thanks, GT, and great start, Blash. Really good insight into more so the statistical data of where we've come, and just listening to your passionate response and information. By gee, I wish we had had that many years ago, but I guess we're a fountain of knowledge now of 2 or 3 generations of seeing a lot of it in the workplace and understanding how to identify, you know, the signs when your friends, colleagues are struggling and what are the trigger points. GT, going back to my days as a professional athlete, you know, I was a young kid, got to fulfill a dream, got drafted. It happened so quick. We're a one-team town. We were, you know, hated by the Victorians because we were a threat to the Victorians. To go to the MCG and take away their holy grail was something that, you know, it was dear to me, and to this day it still is. And it's quite ironic, we're celebrating our 30th anniversary of that famous day, September 26, 1992 at 5:10.
Not that you remember it all.
The Victorians weren't happy what we had just achieved. So that first 4 or 5 years was just a massive high, a roller coaster. We're a one-team town. We were built to be so strong physically. We were built by a coach that wanted to make us so resilient, and it worked. It really worked. But your trajectory is always going so high and so fast with all the fame and success. How high can you go? And to a point, you start to get challenged by opposition teams. You start to get challenged. You get a little bit older. Injuries start to set in. And the trajectory on the way down is just as rapid as the rise on the way up.
And it's the pressure, right? You talked about it the other day. We're not talking about how amazing we'll be on the field. Now your conversations are, how are you, mate? How you going?
Yeah, because everyone only sees what happens between, in the traditional days, between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon. But the mental anguish to build between Monday and Friday to prepare the body and mind is quite a task. And I guess with so much scrutiny and pressure by the media to perform, and then waking up on a Sunday morning and picking up the Sunday Times saying that you cost the side a performance, you lost, the ridicule, the journalists, saying that his time's up or he should get dropped, or, so it's a performance-based industry that we're involved in. And, the stigma around then was, suck it up, be tougher, be stronger, and be resilient. I saw a lot of my teammates suffer in silence, and we didn't have the tools back then to be able to assist my workplace mates. But they got by. They got by hook or by crook. Somehow they got by. We are such a better society now that we don't need to, put them through that ever again to say, just suck it up, get by, you'll be okay. Yeah. No, you won't be okay. We need to address the situations between Monday and Friday. Instead of going Monday to Friday into the gym and doing weights and doing a 2K time trial and doing your yoga and doing your prep before Saturday, we need to spend at least half an hour a day in preparing our mental well-being and to make sure we're feeling okay. There's so many KPIs you have to meet before that Saturday 2 p.m. bounced out. I've got to eat the right thing. I can't have a beer. I can't have ice cream. I can't have that. That's all part of the job. I understand that. But there has to be an element during the day for a minimum of half an hour that we address how we're feeling, not how my fitness is going or how my KPIs are going.
How am I going upstairs?
How am I going?
Yeah.
So I can enjoy playing on Saturday, not get there on Saturday and hope that I get through.
Yeah. Brooksy, can I just ask you a question about that? Because you also have a sporting background, but also, you're working now in the mining industry, and that whole concept, for me, the most powerful part of this conversation is the conversation, because I'm similar to Glenn. I started in media 30 years ago, and we didn't talk about these things. We didn't. The first counselling we had, group counselling at my former employer, was after the Bali bombings. For those of us who'd been involved in covering it and the various impacts of that. But talk to me about what that looks like in your day-to-day, not just as your role as an ambassador with Beyond Blue, but how do you facilitate those workplace conversations? Some of the people watching and listening today might understand the need to, but perhaps don't feel that they know how to initiate a conversation with a colleague or a mate or even themselves who are struggling.
I think for me, the important thing is to notice a change in people's behaviour. Right. And I think if you're aware of people's behaviour, then you can ask the question. The important thing when asking a question is to make the person feel comfortable and relaxed and like they've got an ally in yourself to be able to talk to. It's not about the person that's listening to implant their thoughts or their wisdom. It's about listening to the person that's that may be suffering from a mental health condition. Mm-hmm. And I think too many times those that say, "Are you okay?" they just brush off a yes as if, well, that's okay. He said yes or she said yes. It's a matter of it's about making sure that people feel comfortable and that they feel like they can talk to you and that it's a safe place. And I often find that sometimes it's people would prefer to talk to a stranger because they don't feel like there's going to be a backlash of ridicule or making fun of me because I've told you. So I often come across people who are more akin to wanting to trust someone that perhaps they don't know. But I think the vitally important thing is just to make sure that you're aware of necessarily how people are behaving in the workforce. And one of my signs that my health is starting to struggle is I get short-tempered. I get irritable. I do feel I sometimes feel like I'm tired all the time. And then probably the other one that I face normally is the lack of motivation. So if I start to notice that any one of those sort of 4 or 5 things are starting to wander, then that's a sign for me that, hang on, maybe I need to talk to someone, whether that's a mate or a relative or a mum and dad. We don't always have those people readily available to you. So the important thing is to know that there is someone there that's prepared to listen. And that's the important thing. It's prepared to listen.
Yeah.
And that's why my catchphrase should always be, "Are you okay? Can I listen?" not
Yeah,
just are you okay, because anyone can say, yeah, mate, I'm fine,
yeah,
and then you walk away. But
yeah.
are you okay? Can I listen? Suggest, hey, I'm here to listen to you.
It opens that door, doesn't it? That's a perfect segue into Garry. I just wanted to maybe if you could share with us and with our the people who are online with us today, the journey for you in the business. So many things of what Jacko and Brooksy just said would ring true for you with your team, and this growing business that is not just in Perth, it's not just a smaller group of people, creating an environment where people are heard and know that they're heard and know that there aren't going to be recriminations for saying, hey, look, I'm actually not all right. How has that sort of played out for you in your role and running the business, and how it's obviously something very, very dear to your heart?
Yeah, thanks, GT. And if I go back to Blash's slides before, I was quite shocked to see when I first read the research when it was published, only 16% of the respondents, that's pretty low, feel comfortable to share with their manager. And to me, it's on all of us in business to change that, to get that stat up. And for me, I think Brooksy touched on it, it's that noticing that little changes in people. And yes, here in Perth, it's a little bit easier, and I try every day to walk around and just briefly have a quick chat with everybody and focus on different people, different departments each day. And over time, you get to know people and you can pick up when they answer those questions, Brooksy, and it's not normally the same passion or the same way they answer it. And then we can have a bit of a chat to them. It's a bit harder with our international operations. We've now got teams in Europe and USA, and what I try to do there is use WhatsApp. It's a bit of a social way of connecting. We've got little social groups.
Sure.
We can share pictures of what we're up to. And of course, we try to have regular phone calls with each of them to see how they're going and talk to them. But I find that social interaction opens the door for a better communication. And then it goes back to what you touched on earlier with Brash about leadership by example. I try to make sure when I take a holiday, I disconnect.
Yeah.
I'm not checking in, sending people emails or phone calls every day. I try to lead by example, and to steal a phrase from Stephen Coffey, you got to sharpen the saw. So I try to encourage everyone to take the breaks. We've been trying really hard over the last year or so to try and limit, the after hours emails and phone calls, which is a bit more challenging for me now. We've got international operations.
Sure.
I've now set with my wife's help, I've now set a clear cut-off point in the evening where I do turn the phone off. But it's a bit of a trap, as Brash said before, you can get sucked in because Europe comes online, then USA comes online. But to me, it gets back to that noticing the change.
Yeah.
And giving people access. We're fortunate, we're a medium-sized business, so we've got a great HR manager people can go talk to. But I know for a lot of smaller businesses, they don't have that person. So that's where it comes down.
That's it.
The team on the ground.
And many of the people who might be online today or who either work with the business, Garry, or buy the product, they are sole traders. And I remember when my business was younger and I was a sole trader, and I remember, I'm that old, I remember the 2008 recession, and I remember, in all honesty, sitting on Kings Park here in Perth overlooks the city, and I had a call from what was then a really large client saying, sorry, globally, we're cutting all of our consultants. And I just remember thinking, well, what does that mean? I had this young business. It was just me. And I sat on a piece on the lawn overlooking the War Memorial in Kings Park thinking, I don't know what to do. I've never been here before. Thankfully, I had a couple of really good mentors in my life at the time, and I was able to reach out to them, and they helped me through the practicalities of it. But the stress, I guess, and the that mental, I like to think of it, no, I don't like to think of it, I describe it as a vice in my own situation. Like it just sort of grips you here and you think, how do I, and it was the same at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the same for a lot of CEOs. I'm fortunate, I belong part of a small exec group and we get together once a month. And in the early days, I think we'd spent 2/3 of our time talking about business.
Yeah.
Now we have a check-in session that's meant to be 5 minutes each, and it goes for ages. And it's a great opportunity in a group of people that you trust. Chatham House rules, we all check in, and predominantly we're sharing about how we're feeling, both at a business level and a personal level. And very little business gets discussed in that group now. It's mainly around how we check in and support each other. And, so sometimes you can get that network of support from elsewhere.
Yeah.
You touched upon it. It's important to have it, and you've got to get it where you can find it.
That brings me to my next question, which is to all of you, but I might start with you, Blash, because you have the clinical creds to answer it. So, you know, and I say this in love because I love men. Blokes are great, but men don't really talk the way women do. We're probably more likely to reach out to a girlfriend, that kind of thing. And I know with some of my male friends over the years, you know, that their reluctance to talk is rooted in various different things. But can I just say on behalf of women everywhere, you know, it's not a sign of weakness to talk to your partner, your girlfriend, that kind of thing. Do you think that's a factor? I mean, it's been my observation. There's no data to support it coming from that comment, Blash, but from my observation, there is in many blokes this, no, I've got to be tough, I've got to be strong, I've got to carry this myself. Yeah,
it's a great question, GT. I mean, I think ideas about masculinity have been changing. You know, sure. I've got adult sons in their late 20s and things, and the way they interact with some of their mates seems far more evolved than my bunch of old mates. But, you know, a couple of things I noticed in the clinic. First of all, it can be a pretty tough time for the blokes when there's relationship split-ups.
Sure.
Because often they've been a bit of a passenger on the social arrangements, sure. You know, and they just sort of go, oh, you know, what, have we got dinner again? You know, okay, where, who? You know, I'm being stereotypical.
But this is the reality. I think most of us would be honest and say we've either lived it or observed it.
Yeah, so when there's relationship breakup, it can be pretty isolating because they actually haven't got used to organising their own social stuff as much.
And the whole changes.
Yeah, the other thing to say is even not in that situation, with a lot of the guys, I say, listen, if you've got an arrangement, a lot of male groups like to do something like an activity together, you know, it depends on their finance and their flexibility. You know, they might go do some sport or go for a walk around the park or a ride. But I like the idea of making it a regular catch-up.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you just make a one-off and then it just floats off. But if you go, hey, why don't we have a default that, you know, Saturday morning we meet, whoever can come. We're going to go for a walk and then we're going to go for a coffee or whatever. I think those regular routine things are great for the fellas.
Yeah.
And it can be enormous support. I certainly found that during the pandemic that, you know, amongst my good group of friends, that regular catch-up was absolute gold, particularly for some of the more isolated guys amongst our friendship group.
Blash, can I just add to that? Gemma, is that okay if I just cut in? That's a really important point. If I go back 30 years ago, we were such a tough, you know, looking group. We were a physical team, and we had a coach that was a brutal coach, a disciplinarian. He was team first mentality. The language with men, as you mentioned before, with women, you know, they talk more and they get together more, and they're more, you know, more of a compassionate side. That language is really, really changing. And I'll give you this example. When we had our 10-year reunion, we all got together, and it was like we're still playing the game. When we got to our 20-year reunion, one of our great players had unfortunately passed, which was a very devastating blow under the circumstances. In that 20-year reunion, people have gone on with their lives, had kids, had businesses, and experienced so much what life is there other than sport. Because when you're involved in sport, you're in a bubble. That's it. It's just sport and nothing else exists. To a point now, we met obviously for our 30-year anniversary, and it's not that we're meeting every 10 years. That's more just the celebration of what we achieved. But now, if you look when we meet, we man hug. We give fist pumps and we do a man hug. And if I look at that, and we just had Mick Moldhouse come over for our 30th anniversary, and he's man hugging all of us. 30 years ago, if you had told me I'm going to be man hugging that gentleman who you fear to walk past him down the corridor of our Subi change rooms, and I just think, you know what, this is what it's about, because we actually care for each other.
Yeah.
And the stigma, like in that 10-year reunion, we'd still be taking the mickey out of each other from experiences and trips, and funny things may have happened. And we highlighted someone's stuff up, and 40 blokes would laugh at the expense of one. That is such a demeaning thing to do. And now, 20 years later, we don't do that, because I think, gee, that's not the right language. Yes, it's all well and good in gesture, and it's only a bit of fun and it's a joke. Well, you know what? It probably isn't anymore. It may have been 20 years ago, but it isn't anymore. Mm-hmm. So that tough person, like a John Worsfold or Michael Brennan, they are very, very sensitive people. On the football field, you didn't want to get in their way. They just busted anything in front of them. Mm-hmm. But 30 years later, we're man-hugging these guys. And I think that language is really important. Going back to your point, Gemma, the masculinity of men, I think it's softening.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that we're getting in touch with each other, because I could see some serious problems out there for guys. Mm-hmm. And if they don't talk, and I like that, what Brooksy said, are you okay? Can we have a chat? I think that's something that I'm going to start using in my language, because I'm involved in the construction industry, and I see it every day. And we have Are You Okay Day. We go to site, we do toolbox meetings, but it stops there. I think we've got to add more language to it by saying, are you okay? Can we have a chat? I think that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Just on that, sorry,
yeah,
JT.
No, go for it.
Just on Jacko's point, it's not only those that are perceived as weaker people in the community that have this issue. I know for myself, and I was fortunate enough to play on the halcyon days of with Adelaide City back when we had 9 of my teammates were starting Socceroos, and in the inaugural year of Adelaide United. And life for me on the pitch was all about winning. And as Jacko said, when you're in sport, you're in a bubble. You prepare, you train, you play. And I always trained as hard as I played as hard as I trained. And then it was just repeat the following week. And what my point I'm trying to make is that it's not necessarily those that are perceived as the weak link within a team or within an organisation. Sometimes it can be the star player.
Oh, often.
Nobody knows what that star player is going through. Now, I had my own dealings with attempting to take my life in 2009. On the field, I felt untouchable. My teammates called me the machine. But off the field, my life was spiraling as fast as my professional football career was going up. And that was just, I just didn't know how to deal with it. And I'm glad now that we have more discussions and we have things like this webinar that make people more aware. But I just want to highlight that it's not necessarily always the people at the bottom of the rung that are suffering the most.
Yeah,
absolutely. And a really, really important point. And and if you're watching today and you're feeling a little bit vulnerable, you can always call it for immediate help services like Lifeline, which is 13 11 14. Really important to remember those numbers are there for you. I so relate to one of the things you said before, Blash, if I can just take a half step backwards, about the idea of the simple things that we can all do at home. I have, seeing as we're sharing, I have accessed the GP mental health plan myself over a number of years, like a decade or so ago, and my life took a direction I didn't think it would take, and everything I'd ever imagined my life would look like, it got upended. I used to say to people, it's a shipwreck. I feel like my life is shipwrecked, and I had and have a wonderful family unit to support me, but it still, it goes so far. And I accessed this GP mental health plan, strongly recommend it. And I remember the psychologist I was referred to said to me, Gemma, what do you do for fun? And I looked at him and said, I don't know what I do for fun, because at that period of my life, I didn't know, for a variety of boring circumstances. But the little things in conjunction with getting the right help made, in my circumstances, a really big difference. So going, like the things, I'd go for a walk. I tried lots of different things. I didn't try clay pigeon shooting, but I got back into my horse riding. I just did random stuff that I knew made me happy. I started riding my horse again. I started training physically again. I got fit again. I ran a half marathon. I did all this stuff. And in conjunction with, I suppose, what you call the bigger picture things, the clinical help over a period of time, it was, night and day. I mean, people in my family would just say to me, you're a different person. And it was awful during the time. But if you know you're not alone, I think that's part of the thing feels overwhelming at the beginning. But that list of things that you put up in your slide, they're actually all accessible for all of us.
Yeah. If I can comment there, GT,
Please.
a couple of things. First of all, we know from the research that we have excellent supports that really make a big difference to people's lives. We do the big studies, whether it's psychological treatments, sometimes people need a medication, and it works. And Beyond Blue's got these 2 documents free on their website, one called A Guide to What Works for Depression, another one called A Guide to What Works for Anxiety. And it's written for the public. It's all like everything, complementary treatments and medications, and it'll be free thumbs up, works really well, question mark, don't know if there's much, and it's quite a good guide. But it breaks my heart a bit because we know about 50% of people don't go and get any help at all.
Right.
And that goes to that point of, I'll sort it out myself, which came out in that survey. And things spin out of control, relationships break up, lose their job, might get stuck into the grog, whatever it is. And you think, oh God, I wish they'd just come earlier, got things sorted out. We could have head off a lot of trouble. So that's like one of the big messages is, don't be, if you're listening to this or you've got a mate that you're worried about, get them to get some proper help early because it's actually highly effective.
Gemma, if I go back to myself, about 15 years ago, I had a bit of a tough time in a relationship-wise, and I also was in for a while there, a pretty dark place. And I was fortunate, had a girlfriend, not a friend who was female, who was trained a little bit of this stuff, and she encouraged me to get out. And what I actually did, I started cycling again with a group of buddies, and like Blash was saying before, it became a regular thing. Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, cycling, solving the world's problems over a cup of coffee, and within 3 or 4 weeks, the light was back on, bright as ever. So it's amazing, one, to have someone maybe who did check in on me and identified the issue, and then encouraged me to say, hey, you used to like cycling, why don't you get back into that? And then I was fortunate to have a few friends who agreed to ride with me. And that group's still going now. That's
brilliant. I love that. And that's so true. As you're talking, I remember I adopted a dog. I mean, not everyone can adopt a dog, but I rescued this 4-year-old dog. His name is Buster. He has his Instagram account and a Twitter account, so you can check him out later. But I remember this dog, and I said to my mum about, 6 months after I'd adopted him, I said to Mum, what did I ever do before Buster came to live with me? And she's like, I don't know, but you complain a lot less now. And for me, it was just having something else to focus on in that period of time that was incredibly trying. And you mentioned, Blash, at the beginning about this idea of identity, and so much of our identity, and I know this is true for me, identity is wrapped up in what we do for a living. It's identity is wrapped up in our marriages or our relationships and our businesses, and perhaps our sporting, like Jacko and Brooksy said, our sporting prowess or our achievements. But fundamentally and underlying that is the need to know that if all of that's stripped away, I'm still a good person, I'm still loved, I still matter, and my life still matters. And that's a pretty, in my experience anyway, that's a pretty challenging road to walk down on your own.
Can I just add to that, JT? One of the things back when I was going through the tough time that I went through, one of the things that were pointed out to me was that when I was in that really dark place was I had kids that loved me and I had family that loved me. And that just really hit home to me so hard. And that was a catalyst for me seeking help and then getting myself on the road to recovery. So yeah, you're 100%, you're correct. You strip back all the accolades, and Jacko would know. You can keep all your premierships, but at the end of the day, once you strip back, it's what's inside that matters. And we're all human, we're all unique, but we're all very special, and that's what people have got to try and see on the inside.
Brooksy, if I can just add to that, I think Ray's a really good point. a valid point. We live in such a fast world now, into the digital world. We're always on our devices, and we're chasing something that sometimes we don't know what we're chasing.
Yeah, so true.
You know, a higher promotion, or our KPIs and something. It's and you get home and you're exhausted, and then you start up all again. And we're wired a certain way, and our wires obviously get burnt out. One of the things that really helped me, and I think it's a good perspective, and what does that look like for each and every one of us and all our colleagues and work colleagues. But my last 10 years, I coached my last game this Sunday at junior footy. And I fell into junior footy at my local club at Applecross down here, where my son plays. I was never going to get involved. I didn't, because my son was playing. I didn't want to put that pressure on him. And 3 days before the first game 10 years ago, we had a coach. We had everything sorted, and the coach got a FIFO job. So we were out without a coach for our under fours team, and all the parents looked at me and says, "Well, you're the next best qualified to coach this group." So I reluctantly took it on. Next minute, I'm on the committee. I'm the coaches coordinator. I cook the barbecues. It's been the best. It's been the best 10 years of my sporting career, and it's got nothing to do with AFL, because I went back to where it all started, kicking the dew off in the morning. And my point here is, it's a happy place.
Yeah.
I'm cooking the barbecue. I'm watching kids play. I'm teaching kids. I'm mentoring kids. And these kids are like a sponge. And it resonated to me in saying, that's what I was 25, 30, 40 years ago, whatever it was, that kid that got up in the morning. And the most sacred thing for me was my footy socks had to be rolled up, and then you fold them at the top. And I had to make sure that line, because my coach says, if you can't be a footballer, son, look like one. So my preparation was attention to detail. So now I go and I watch the kids, and we've got a big day this weekend, and we're hosting some finals, and we're the host club. I go around and I tell them, kids, pull your socks up, make sure your boots are tied up, but it's a happy place. It's simple. Yeah. I'm a volunteer. And Sunday, I'm going to shed a few tears, because it's my time has come. Our team will go on next year, because they're all 16, 17-year-old, these boys. But I took them out of Auskick, and I had a part in their life. Now they're working at McDonald's. They're going to do their HSC next year. We weren't talking about that 10 years, and now they're growing up to be fine young men. And it's a real critical period now, because when I was in their shoes, there was no mobile phones. There was no Twitter. There was no Instagram. And we have to change our teachings to make sure that, their next 2 or 3 years is like 10 years crammed into 2 or 3 years. So going back to junior footy, and the point of raising this is, going back to that happy place is really, really important. And you've got to find it, and how you do that's the navigating part of it that can be quite, like Garry said, he got on with a bunch of mates riding. Gemma went and, got a rescue dog and adopted a dog. So everyone's got to find that, I think, and sometimes it's hard to do, but having good people around you to remind you, say, hey, why don't you join a yoga class? Now, if you told blokes, us blokes 30 years ago, that you're going to be doing yoga, I'm going, mate, I'm not doing that. I need to do yoga because I can't get out of bed in the morning because my body's a bit busted up. I love yoga because it actually makes me, by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I feel like I can play a game of footy. But it's because of this new technology or a way of thinking. We've got programs, we've got resources, we've got activities that's going to help us physically. Now, if you're good physically, your fair chance mentally.
So true.
And that's one of my catch cries, Jacko, and panel is nothing changes if you don't change. And I try and live by that every day. If you keep going to the same well and expecting a different result, then it's not going to happen. So if you want change, you've got to make change.
Can you repeat that again, Brooksy, because I'm writing that down.
Nothing changes if you don't change.
And
the one for Are You Okay is, can I listen?
Can I listen? That's the one. Guys, we're not far off wrapping up. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. But before we go, I just wanted to ask another practical question to Blash, if I could. And it actually just is a lovely segue from what Brooksy just said. You know, are you okay? Can I listen? We know that many people, their first response will be like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. How far do you press someone before perhaps saying to a colleague at work, or, you know, in Garry's business, going to HR and saying, I'm concerned about my mate at work, I'm concerned about my colleague, or if you're a sole trader, if you're, you know, working on your own or with 1 or 2 other people, like what are some practical advice you can give everyone watching today to understand what's just a, you know, I'm okay, and maybe ask again in a few days, or someone who really is in trouble and needs a bit more help?
Yeah, so it's one of the tougher sort of conversations, and a couple of things I want to say about it. First, remember, you don't have to be a psychologist, right? As a human being, if you're worried about someone else, you can ask them, right? Use your common sense, like pick a good time, a good place. Obviously, when they're on their own, not other people around. I think with a lot of men, not always, but sometimes when you're doing something else, like you're going for a drive together, or you're going for a walk, or kick of the footy or something, and it's in the conversation. And usually the way I like to start is I say, I've noticed that, you know, you missed 3 days last week, or, you know, noticed you told me you had huge nights the last 3 nights and slept in, you know, so you start off with just an observation, and then you go, how are you going? And then the hard thing, I think, as Brooksy said, is try to shut up, try to listen. Most of us want to jump in and go, what you should do is this, do that, do this, and what happened to me, blah, blah, blah. You know, so most of us struggle a bit just to sit back and listen. Now, if you get the Aussie sort of, she's right, I'm right, mate, I'm right, don't worry, because you've flagged that you're interested. They might come back to you. You might not be the person they want to talk to as well. You know, so I think a lot of it's common sense. I think that your role might be to say, that's awful. I don't really know what to do. What do you think could help? And the thing they tell you might not be what you're imagining. Particularly in an employment situation, it might be something that's really easy to fix. You know, they go, look, you know, Thursday afternoons, I've got these medical appointments. Is there any way we could move the shifts around? You're like, yeah, of course we can. So if you don't communicate, it's very hard for the workplace to make any adjustments. Beyond Blue on their Heads Up website's got this whole section about how to and whether to disclose to your workplace if you're having a mental health issue.
Right.
And it's not one size fits all. You know, if you're in a pretty toxic workplace, you know, we're all in the real world, it might not be that great to go along. You know, you're on the cusp of your promotion and you've gone along and you think, oh gosh. So, you know, you got to weigh it up. But if you're in a supportive workplace and good culture, and you don't have to tell them your whole story either if you don't want to, but you might say, look, I've got a bit going on, I'm getting some help for it. What would be enormously helpful is, you know, if I could pass on that account to Fred, because I've got a bit too much on my plate at the moment, would that be possible? You know, you can work on a solution. And many employers, especially at the moment, are quite enlightened about this stuff. And it suits them. They don't want to go, you know, they want to come up with a good solution too.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's just a few tips there.
That's great, guys. I've been given the gentle wind up, and I said, we could talk about this for hours. It's a very worthy topic of conversation. But Michael Brooks, Glen Jakovich, Garry Johnson, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing so honestly about your experiences. It speaks volumes, and I'm sure that people watching today would have not just been helped by hearing what you went through and how you went through it, but also that feeling of we're not alone in this. None of us are alone in this, and that's just priceless. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Gemma, before we go, just one quick one, and this is for you, Garry, and here's my yoga flexibility. See these steel blue boots? They're the blue Beyond boots. So they're dirty, Garry. I need a new pair, okay?
Oh,
brilliant. And just a reminder to everybody.
Good sales pitch.
$10 from every sale of the blue safety boots goes to Beyond Blue. So great plug there, Jacko. Nice work. Blash,
Did you like my yoga move?
I did. I was very impressed, quite frankly.
Don't worry, Glenn, I do yoga, and she's like, you squat now. I go, I am.
Blash, if I can just get you to quickly point everyone back to the Beyond Blue website and a quick recap of the resources that are there in the 30-odd seconds that we've got before we say goodbye.
Yeah, look, heaps of stuff on Beyond Blue. Easiest is just Google Beyond Blue. You'll get to our website. There's all the phone numbers are there. You give us a call. The forum's amazing. If you're more of a typer, you can chat to lots of people about lots of different things. And remember the new access business coaches. That's really good for small business people. Free. Look on the Beyond Blue website. Have a chat to a business person who's
beyondblue.org.au 1300 22 4636.
Brooksy's
Brilliant.
on the case. There you go.
Brilliant. Once again, everyone, thanks for joining us on behalf of Steel Blue Boots and Beyond Blue and me and my team. We've had such a joy helping put this event together, and I know it's been a benefit to so many people. So thank you once again. If you haven't been able to watch this in its entirety, or there's someone that you know who wanted to log on and join us but wasn't able to, it will be available via a link that will be distributed shortly, I'm told. So have a wonderful day. Take good care of you and yours, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, GT.
See you later.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.